back with the belated week 3 Artist Way revamp. If you watched my video yesterday, you saw an update where I talked about how I was super sick with the flu and I ran around my house last week, and that's why no videos or Instagram or anything got done. But I'm back here with week 3. I actually finished week 3 the week before and was going to do a Saturday update, and then, like I said, everything just kind of went in the air. So that's okay. I'm here with it now for the Artist Way. Yay, week 3. So week 3 for me has been very intense, whereas week 1 and 2 were kind of like, oh, okay. Week 3 has been quite intense. I didn't do as many pages as I would like. I think I did, like the week I was well, I did 5 out of 7 days. And then for my artist date, I went to HMV, which is a store in Canada. I don't know if it's anywhere else. And unfortunately they're closing, which is really sad because it's been around since I was a kid at least. And they used to sell, it was a record store, and I still call it, I'm like, oh, the record store. Even though records, you know, aren't really, well, I guess they're kind of a thing now. They're like a retro thing, but you know what I mean. But they sell all sorts of pop culture stuff now. So I went there, they had a sale, and I got some t-shirts, and that was a lot of fun and stuff to find some deals and stuff on that. So that's what I did for Artist Day. As for other issues, there was like a lot of stuff that came up, especially with being sick this past week. So like week 3 for me was almost like a 2-week deal. I think that sometimes the first thing it talks about here in recovering our sense of power is anger. And I think especially as women we're taught that we're not supposed to be angry, we're supposed to be nice all the time. And I think there's this thing kind of in the New Age community where it's like you're not supposed to have any negative feelings. But that's completely unrealistic. And being a positive person doesn't mean that you never get sad or angry or upset about things. Like, you're a human being, and that's ridiculous. And anger is a channel of our power. Anger tells us when something is wrong. It tells us when we've had our boundaries crossed. And so I think anger is like it's a good tool. And it lets us know where we've, you know, maybe we're angry at ourselves, maybe we've been cheating ourselves or letting ourselves down. So anger is an invitation to action. Of course, if you wallow in anger and you feed it, that's a bad thing. But you need to listen to it. Anger is your friend. It's telling you something. So talk about anger here. And I found that I was getting angry about not having time for myself. For those of you who probably know what this is like when you work like a 9 to 5, 40-hour week job, and you spend your time commuting and then working, and then you come home and you take care of everyone, and then you're like, what's left for me? And I found I was getting angry about that, and not at anybody in my life because it's not about them, but really realizing that I had to carve some time for me, and that's super duper important, because if mama ain't happy, ain't no one happy. And if I'm not taking care of me, then other people aren't gonna be taken care of. And I think too, like as women, we're always taught like we have to put everybody else first, and we're like everyone else's servant. And I think that that's a bunch of bull crap. And we are here for ourselves as well. And that doesn't mean that we don't help others, because of course that's ridiculous. But it does mean that we have to start really like thinking about ourselves and putting ourselves first in a lot of ways. So that's kind of what this week was a big kind of thing for me. And then the second thing that this chapter talks about is synchronicity, how things kind of come together. And I've definitely have had points in my life that are very synchronicity happens, and synchronicity is like those coincidences, and I don't actually believe in coincidences. I think that there's no such thing as a coincidence, but synchronicity, there hasn't been like a lot that's happened for me synchronicity wise, but I know when I do this book, synchronicities start to pop up. But I started to notice certain themes in my life, things like that start coming back a lot. So I think maybe in some ways being sick the week that I was off and I was planning to have time to myself forced me to not run around and do a bunch of things, but to kind of like just like sit back and read and, you know, rest and things in some ways. So maybe that's synchronicity. And then they talk about shame, about how like we're often shamed as artists when we're younger. You know, somebody will tell us that, for example, like with kids, will say like, kids will tell them, you know, they're singing badly, or somebody will make a comment about a drawing or something. And I think we've all had that as kids growing up, is that somebody, you know, put us down and we took it to heart. And instead of just realizing that was somebody else's opinion, we took it to heart and took that on ourselves. And I think too, people will shame us sometimes for being creative if we say something that they don't want to hear. And that can play out like later on in our lives. So really the importance of telling our truth and telling our story and working through those feelings can be very healing and very powerful as well. And then she has a part about dealing with criticism, because there's criticism that damages and criticism that's useful. And I really learned about this when I was in art school. In art school, we had crits. So we would have a project, and then everybody would pull out their artwork, and then there'd be a crit. People would say what they liked and what they didn't like about it, but you weren't allowed to say, well, I hate it, or I don't like that, or that's stupid. Well, what do you not like about it? Or what do you think could have been done better? Or how would have you done it? You have to be able to explain yourself and explain about the piece. And I mean, a lot of times when somebody had a good point about a piece, I didn't get upset about it, because I was just like, oh, that's an interesting thought. That's very, very good. And it's funny how like criticism that is useful is a lot more positive and doesn't elicit the same feelings as criticism that is meant to shame you. How dare you make that piece? That's terrible. That's awful. And usually that kind of shaming criticism doesn't have specifics, and it's very hard to refute because it doesn't have specifics, and attacks the artist as a person as opposed to pointing out maybe something in the work that could have been improved. So I thought that this is a very helpful part about dealing with criticism. And then she gets you to do some detective work, things like exploring what was your favorite childhood toy, what was your favorite game as a kid, what have you not that you enjoy that you haven't done in a long time, things like that, to really get you to look at like what parts of yourself have you abandoned along the way. What parts, and this isn't so much about like sometimes something just doesn't serve us anymore, or it's not us anymore, and that's okay. But sometimes we abandon things because we're worried about what other people think. We're worried that it's not adult, or we worry that, oh, well, you know, I can't enjoy that anymore for whatever reason. And sometimes you have to pick those things back up because they are part of you and they're part of taking your power back. And then she talks about growth, how growth comes in fits and starts whenever you're doing any kind of thing like this, or psychological work or shadow work or whatever it is. Growth is like, you may feel like you're plateauing, and then you hit a big bump, and sometimes you may feel like you're sliding back. It's not a straight line. If anything, it's kind of a spiral. And so you have to be patient with yourself and realize that growth and change doesn't always look pretty. It doesn't always look the way you want it to, and it's not always linear. So it was kind of like a big week, and a lot of these issues kind of like the past couple weeks have really like hit me in the face, so to speak. I feel like this eclipse that happened recently kind of just punched me in the face a little bit. And you know, like the eclipse for me was right on my sun sign, so I kind of knew something was going to happen, but I was expecting something external to happen, and it was more of an internal thing. So it was sort of interesting that way. If you have done your week 3, let me know what issues came up for you, what you may have been working through. Was it a quiet week for you? Was it a busy week for you? Did you have a lot of breakthroughs? Let me know. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.